Well, welcome everybody to GICTV episode number 5. Real honor to have Michael Leemhuis from Leemhuis Consult out in Florida. So almost a late night over there for you, Michael. But I was going through your bio. You got a lot of initials behind your names. So some real years and years of experience. I've been very fortunate to see you and have met you many years ago. Same with Greg Patterson and Norm Spitzig and many others. Over the years, it inspired me personally. So it's a real honor to have you on board. Just a quick snapshot for the ones that didn't have a chance to read the bio sent through a little bit earlier. But you've been the president of the Ocean Reef Club. I guess that would be a city in its own. CEO of Congressional Country Club, which has held a few PGA Tour events and U.S. Opens. President of the Club Managers Association of America. And the list goes on. Originally from South Africa, a PGA member in the U.S. and in South Africa, but you've been down to down under. A few of the people are on today are old friends of ours. So we'll try not to get into the rugby discussion here with you, Michael, till after. But before we have a chat with Michael and he can get started on his webinar, today's format will be just a quick chat. We'll hand it over to Michael to go through his presentation on shaping your personal future. Characteristics and traits of a successful leader. When we're finished, if you can send any questions through, we'll open the chat line and just have an open discussion after, if that's okay with Michael and everybody. And we can deep dive a little bit more from Michael's discussion at that time. Well, Michael, how have you been? What have you been up to? You've been busy the last few years since leaving Ocean Reef.
Mike, thanks. Yeah, it's been an interesting time. I retired at 65 from Ocean Reef. That was February last year, and really knew I didn't want to kind of, go into retirement and do nothing, and started this little consulting business. And just, how everything happens, you always think it's going to cost twice as much money to get something started and take twice as much time to get it done, right? I was just very fortunate. Right from the word go, I ended up with 3 clients very quickly that basically, kind of have me on a retainer, which has allowed me to do a lot of other things with that base, as it were. So it's been an exciting time. I mean, I'm still stay in touch with obviously with a lot of the guys in the industry. We have a group called the Alliance, which we have weekly meetings. It's a group of some of the top 16 clubs in the country, and we have a weekly meeting where we share stuff and we share all what's going on with COVID. And every week I get on the phone, I just tell them, and I'm sure my colleague Greg feels the same way. I'm so glad I'm not managing clubs during COVID. It is so, I sort of lived through one of my clients at Riviera Country Club, so I lived through her, and we've kind of worked through this, but it's a difficult time for everybody. And really that, Michael, was the genesis of this presentation. One of my clients, I think I shared with you, is the PGA of America. Yeah. And when we went down for 3 months, what we were looking for is how do we share a message with our PGA members that a lot of them were sitting at home, the clubs were closed, golf was closed, nothing was happening. How do we sort of motivate them to think of this time as an opportunity to do something other than just sit around and mope and kind of think about what could be. And that was really the genesis of this. And then when you and I talked about it, obviously lots of friends in Australia and New Zealand and that part of the world. And, it's a pleasure to be with you. I mean, I'm excited about this.
Yeah, it was wonderful to see the pictures on social media. I know you catch up with our Kiwi friends and the Aussies that make it over every year. Next year may not be the case for us, unfortunately, with depending on where the international travel bans go. But some great stories there, and it's been great. You said sharing is caring, and have someone of your wealth of experience for probably one of the biggest clubs around at Congressional, especially, that it's unimaginable what you'd have to deal with if you're running that at the moment. But excellent. It's good to have you on, Michael. Thanks for your time. I know you've had a massive day today, but I'll hand it over to you, and you can start up into your webinar. I'll take my picture off, and we'll get underway.
Thanks, Mike, and really just thank you for the opportunity, and really just to say how excited I am to be with all of you. And I know that we We have a number of different participants. I'm not going to pull that up because you can see my screen right now. So if I did that, all I do is load up all the participants. But it's really great. I had a look at the list of names earlier on. And it's great to see so many friends that have taken time out of your busy days to kind of sit with me and for us to go through some of this stuff. You know, I feel really passionate about this stuff. But before I get into this stuff, I did want to share. Oh, no, it's frozen. I did want to share with you a picture that was taken in February this year of my good friend Greg Patterson and his beautiful wife in Dallas. But Greg, if you haven't got that picture, I'll be happy to send it to you. But so I want to go back to this, the title, Shaping Your Personal Future, the Characteristics and Trends of Successful Leaders. Again, this is, you know, some of the research that I've done over the years, and I find this fascinating because, you know, everybody defines success differently. And really what we're going to talk about tonight is, or this morning, is a little bit about success. And so when I was doing this presentation, and I think we ended up going through, I want to say, over 1,200 different PGA members and general managers jumped onto these different calls. So a lot of people, you know, jumped on and were sort of interested in trying to find this. And part of this discussion was, you know, when is a good time to start? You know, and you're always looking for that perfect time. You know, I'm going to start my diet tomorrow. I'm going to stop smoking on Wednesday. I'm going to start exercising on Sunday. There's all of these different stories and all of these different excuses that we use. But part of this was really to help motivate, and it is, I use this myself, and it's really to try and motivate you. There is no perfect time to get started. And basically, you got to get started as soon as you can, because if you don't get today, another week goes by, another month goes by, another year goes by. This is one of my favorite slides, only because it's a rusty old saw, but you know what? It cuts the wood. And again, it's sharpening the saw. What are you doing? What are each one of us doing each and every day to make ourselves better? You know, I'm on the tail end. I'm 66 years old. I'm on the tail end of my career. But every day I'm looking for new things that I can take on, challenges that I can take on to make myself better in what I'm doing and how I serve my clients. I'll share a quick story with you. I believe it is, I'm trying to remember now. It was a while when I did this. But one of the universities, and I can't remember who it was, one of the universities was doing a course on happiness. And I saw this was a free course, and they were saying about how popular this course is. It's the #1 freshman course at the university. It might even have been at Harvard. I can't remember. But I went and signed up for this course, and it was enthralling. It was an 8-week course. It was online. But again, there's so much of that out there. There's so much of this going on with COVID that you just have to, you know, you have to be aware of it. Find something that really interests you, and then get out there and sharpen the saw. What are you doing each and every day? Are you exercising? Are you riding your bike? All of these things that at the end of the day, as you'll see later, are arrows in your quiver. So this presentation is a lot about posing questions to each and every one of you. And I pose these questions to myself. I pose these questions especially to my kids. And I have 2 kids, as I think most of you know, a lot of you know. One's 33, one's 29. And right from early childhood, as they went through school and as they went through university, as they got scholarships to play sport at school, the question was, you know, I want you to be a leader. I want you to understand what that means. I want you to understand what successful means. So this is something that's been with me for a while. And here I'm asking the question, I'm posing the question, who wants to be wildly successful? Well, when this question is asked, and we're doing it either at CMAA or in a crowded room with 100 people there, you know, I ask people to put up their hands. And it's a rhetorical question because everybody ends up putting up their hands. Of course, everybody wants to be wildly successful. But then again, not everybody wants to change the world, but not everybody wants to change themselves. And one of the biggest things I find is that people talk about, oh, I love change. I really like change. But change is tough for a lot of people. I would say change is a very difficult thing for people. Getting out of habits and creating new habits and making changes in one's life is very, very difficult. So then I asked the question, what does success mean to you? because each and every one of us on this call today has got a different definition of success. And there is no one right or wrong answer to success, but there are a lot of commonalities here. And again, I always put this up because when people think about success and you think about successful people, they tend to want to translate that to wealth. The Elon Musks of the world, the Warren Buffetts of the world, they want to say those people are successful and they're successful, and what makes them successful is money. The other one is things, you know, people who have a lot of things. You know, I don't drive a very fancy car. I don't, you know, have a lot of fancy stuff. I know Greg and I have had this discussion. I know he falls in the same category, but a lot of people will put their store on fancy stuff and things. But again, for me, that's not success. And I think for each one of us, we'll define it differently. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't have money, and I'm not suggesting you shouldn't have a nice car. And, you know, God bless you if you have a helicopter, but that's not necessarily what it is. You know, I really like Jim Rohn and a couple of things that he says about things that are more important than money. And again, when you look at these 9 things that are listed there, I mean, each and every one of them is just so impactful and so important. And really, you could spend, you know, 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe an hour on each one of these slides. I mean, the older I get, the more I realize how important and how precious time is, how I use my time, and how I share my time and give of my time and give of myself with others. It's just so important. And look at all the others: desperation, determination, courage, you know, taking action, doing something, ambition, you know, do you have the drive to want to do something? So again, this presentation PDF, Mike's going to send to each one of you, and you can kind of digest this and go through it again. And then there's a worksheet afterwards that'll help you kind of work through this and set your own goals and your own sort of success goals as we go through. This is my favorite slide because I don't think necessarily about money or about things. I kind of look at this and I think this is my slide. This is a slide that speaks volumes to me. I want to stand at the top of my mountain, not anybody else's mountain, my personal mountain, and I want to put the thumb up and say, hey, I've achieved, this is what I've done, this is what's made me successful, and in my definition. And my definition, again, is going to be different than everybody else's, but in my definition. And I'm going to share with you a little bit later on in this presentation some really personal things about me that I'm going to share with you. And I do it only because I want to share with you how many successful things you all have in your lives. And you may not see them as successes, and yet they are. And I urge you, as you go through this, please don't think of this as braggadocious. It's not. It's just more to help you understand the arrows that you have already collected and how you can take those arrows and put them in your quiver. So the next question that we pose is, do you know what success looks like? And I love this slide, and hopefully you can see this. I've got this little picture up here. I'm going to move it to the side here. But when you look at this, and I love having this conversation, especially with students and with my own kids. You know, when I talk to my kids, the slide on the left, success, what people think it looks like, the straight line graph arrow going up from 0 at the bottom to 100% on the top. And as we all know in life, that's not at all what success looks like. I've had more backward knocks, more sideward knocks than most people. You know, having come to America as an immigrant, started from really with nothing, you have to go backwards. I left a very successful position in South Africa, moved to America with my American wife and my young baby, and honestly thought the world was going to bow down and say, thank goodness, Mike, you've arrived. Thank you for coming to America and helping us. Well, as you all know, that could not have been further from the truth. What happened was I ended up having to do a lot of menial jobs, you know, working in a supermarket, you know, pouring concrete driveways, doing stuff that I couldn't even have imagined I would have done, you know, when I was living in South Africa. So again, my kids always tell me that, you know, the slide on the left is how my career has gone, and I remind them that on the right is exactly how life goes. Life is going to deal you some challenges, and you just have to deal with it. I don't know why this is not clicking on. Maybe I'm talking too long. So here, a quick slide about success doesn't come to you. You have to go to it. And as we progress through this presentation, you'll see why I say that, because it's not your right or your privilege to be successful. It's your right and privilege if you work for it or work towards it. So one of the things we talk about is, where do you see yourself? And, you know, in COVID, in the last 3 months, maybe 4 months now, actually March 13th for me, we were locked down for here in where I am in Jupiter, Florida, for about 3 months. We just opened up a while back, but we were asking ourselves a question during COVID, you know, what's happening today? What's happening tomorrow? What's happening the next day? What's happening next week? Maybe what's happening next month? But that's not real life. We're in a different kind of situation. But really, when you look at your career, what you're asking yourself is, where do you see yourself in 1 year time, in 3 years time, in 5 years time, and then in 10 years time? I learned from a senior search executive, one who worked for Spencer Stewart. He said, you know, if you're in the same job for 10 years, you should be planning to retire from that job. And I know Greg was at the Beach Club for 30 plus years. I was at Congressional for 16. I didn't think I'd ever move from Congressional and go down to Ocean Reef, but you know, things didn't work. So as I was saying, the two key questions that we have for each person that I asked my kids and I asked myself, and I'm asking you. The first one is, will you take action? Because it's really interesting that one can talk about what one wants to do at some time during your life or sometime in the future. But at the end of the day, if you don't take action, nothing is going to happen. And I love this story. I love to tell this story because having done a couple of marathons in my life, one of the things, the reason I like to use that is you don't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to run a marathon, and then put your shoes on the next day and walk out of your house and run a marathon. It just doesn't work like that. That is not how it works. The action one has to take is one has to take action on a regular basis, day in and day out. You have to get out of bed, put the shoes on, go for a 1 mile run, come back. The next day, do the same. The next day, do the same, adding to the distance as you go. So will you take action is a question you need to answer for yourself. The price of inaction is far greater than the cost of making a mistake. And oftentimes what doesn't allow us to take action is the fact that we're going to make a mistake, or that we might make a fool of ourselves, or we might show our weaknesses. And that, of course, is not the right way to go about this. So here we have a slide. 5 frogs are sitting on a log and 4 decide to jump off. How many are left? Well, again, it's a rhetorical question, because just because you decide to jump off doesn't mean that you actually jumped off. And of course, the answer is 5. A decision is not an action. Another one of my favorite slides is just the key to success is doing stuff. What are you doing? What are you doing to allow yourself to be successful each and every day? What is in your DNA? What is in your habits and how you behave that allow you to be successful? What are those things repeatedly that you do that become a habit that allow you to be successful? The second question, ladies and gentlemen, is what will you sacrifice? So it's one thing saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take action. I'm going to go for a run. You know, Mike said I should go for a run every day. I got to put my shoes on. I got to increase my distance, and off I've got to go. But to do that, you have to sacrifice. What are the sacrifices? Well, you got to get to bed early. You can't go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and get up at 5 o'clock to go for a run. Well, you may for the first 2 or 3 days, but then it's going to get old very quickly. You can't go out drinking and having a party until midnight and then think you're going to do that. You also have to take into account the fact by doing that, depending on when you're doing it, could impact your relationship with your spouse. It could impact your relationship with your kids. These are all sacrifices that one has to be aware of before you embark on doing something. You have to think through, what are the things that I'm going to have to give up? What are the things that I'm going to have to put to one side to do this? Now, we know that we all have 24 hours in a day. We know that on average, 7 to 8 hours sleep is what we need to do. And even given the benefit of the doubt of hardworking club managers, which we're all been a part of, but on average, you know, the average work day is 8 hours. Maybe we work 10 hours, 11 hours, whatever the number is. there's still 5 to 6 hours in every day that we seem to squander away. If sometimes it could be sitting on a couch, it could be watching TV, it could be a lot of different things. I don't know what they all are, but I know that if you don't plan some of that time, if you don't plan to be with your kids, don't plan to be with your spouse, don't plan to go and exercise, it ends up not happening. So what will you sacrifice? So Vince Lombardi was a member of Congressional Country Club and probably one of the greatest football coaches, American football coaches we've seen in the United States. And I love this quote: the difference between a successful person and others is not a lack of strength, not a lack of knowledge, but rather a lack of will, a lack of commitment and getting out to do something. And this, again, the number one underlying reason why 5% succeed, be it in sports, business, or any other field for that matter, is because of this. They are willing to do more than what's been asked. And I think that's another one of the things we see a little later in this presentation is work ethic. You know, what are you prepared to do? What time are you prepared to put in? So this is the part where I start, you know, I'm going to spend a little time sharing some of my own personal stuff with you, but it's interesting. You know, I know Greg is an English literature guy and an English historian, and this sort of harkens back to Robin Hood in the Nottingham Forest and Sherwood Forest, shall I say, and basically robbing from the rich and giving to the poor. And the reason I put this up is not because of the bow so much, but because of the quiver and the arrows. You know, I look at those arrows. Each of those arrows is something that I put in my career or my life quiver, and the more arrows I can put in the quiver for myself, the better I believe I can do at the end, whether it's presenting for a piece of business, whether it's presenting myself for a job, whatever it is. I feel like if you can put good arrows in your quiver, good, straight, strong arrows in your quiver with good quills, you're going to end up doing what needs to be done. So what are your personal definitions of success? What are your arrows that you have in your quiver? And this in your worksheet, when you get the worksheet from Mike, you're gonna ask yourself this, and you're gonna look at this. But I wanted to share my personal arrows with all of you for what it's worth. And it's really just to, as again, highlight and show you all the successes you've already had in your lives, in your careers, in your personal lives. You've already had these successes, but I don't know that you necessarily realize that, or if you don't, I just wanted to remind you of them. So in my personal definition of success, the arrows that I put in my quiver, the things that are important to me, are the things that I'm sharing with you on the screen. The first and foremost, I'm not going to get into politics or religion, but first and foremost, I'm a husband. I've been married for 38 plus years, and I'm really proud of that. And that point alone got me this gig that I'm doing in the Bahamas. This is a extremely generous guy, very demanding, great project in the Bahamas. It's called the Bryland Club. It's just being developed right now, marinas and real estate. And what got me the job over and above some of these other things that are in here was the fact that he and I connected, that we'd been married for so long. Now, I understand people have their divorces that happen and things go awry. I'm not condemning. I'm not even judging any of that. I'm just saying what works for me is that I'm a husband and that I'm a father. I have 2 sons. I shared that with you. You're coming to America. I think of myself as an immigrant. I did it all the right way. I'm a US citizen, and I'm really proud of that, but it was not easy. And that's another arrow in my quiver that I had to work really hard to make it in a big country like the United States, having come from South Africa. Again, now you start layering in your university degrees. You know, you've been to college, you've done some graduate work, maybe you have a graduate degree, maybe you have a PhD, and that's a big deal in the United States. There's a lot of people that have done that. In fact, one of the guys that used to run Grey Oaks, Jim Butler, is a very interesting guy. He had the PGA certification, he had the GC Golf Course Superintendents Association of America certification, he had the CCM, he had an undergraduate degree, a master's degree, and a PhD. Really interesting guy. I'm not saying you need all of that, but I'm just sharing with you that that's one of my arrows. you know, one of the biggest things for me is CMAA and my membership with the CMAA, and then going through my certification. That was just tremendously valuable for me. I know in Australia and New Zealand, you guys are working diligently on this and have done a number of these different certifications and different courses, some of them with CMA, others on your own. So again, PGA membership, you know, both of my memberships in South Africa and America, sporting achievements. When I'm talking to PGA golf professionals, as I have done the last 3 months, you know, for them, it's, you know, I played on the tour, I played on the mini tour. You know, Mike, you must have played some really good golf. There are a lot of really good golfers in Australia and New Zealand. A lot of people who are in the PGA, a lot of them have significant playing careers, have played at uni, have played at college. And for me, that wasn't. I'm, you know, a very mediocre golf professional, very mediocre player. My sporting achievements came in, you know, running marathons and doing triathlons. Doing the Ironman triathlon was a big deal for me because I'm not built to do an Ironman triathlon. I'm, you know, 220 pounds, I'm 6 foot. I'm not your typical, you know, triathlete that goes out there and runs. Everything, running, cycling, and swimming is difficult for me. But all three of those things are things that we learn to do as kids and are easy to do. And then finally, the last one of arrows that I put in my quiver is meaningful work. And meaningful work to me is, you know, where you've worked, what you've done, have you made a difference? Did you leave a legacy? And again, I've been blessed. As I said, I've had an opportunity to work at Ocean Reef, Congressional, the PGA Tour, and then in Sun City. Some of you may have seen this. This was an article that I did 2014. We did the same research in 2012, and we did it in 2010. And basically what I was trying to get to is I was trying to find out, you know, what are the traits and characteristics of really competent leaders in our industry, and club leaders. And unlike the academians out there, the academics that are, you know, talking about it, researching about it, I wanted to hear from people like you and me, club managers who actually have got our boots on the ground, who are actually doing this every day. So when this went out, it went out to about 250 people around the world, 200 here, 50 international. Some of the people on this call were actually responders to this survey that was done. And here in this little box over here on the right-hand side, I'm going to walk you through them. But here on this right-hand side were some of the things that my fellow club managers were telling me that what they thought was important in being able to take club leadership to the next level. So here they are here, the characteristics and traits of successful leaders. And as I said, 250 plus golf industry surveyed. I think the return rate was about 68%. And as you all know, that's unbelievably good if you get that kind of return rate on a survey. So the first one was integrity. And when I talk about integrity, I know some of you know Jim James, who is the lead guy, the lead hospitality guy at Augusta National. I know he's come out to Australia and New Zealand and spoken. But my best story about Jim James is that every year for the Masters, you know, thousands of people want to go and work at the Masters, whether it's cleaning toilets, whether it's selling, you know, the pimento cheese sandwiches, whatever it is, they want to go and work there. This is a lifetime opportunity and experience for them. And before they hire anybody, and some of you probably heard the story, but before they hire anybody, they give somebody an honesty test. And the honesty test is very simple. On a scale from 1 to 10, how honest are you? And this speaks to me volumes in integrity, because I don't want you to answer. Thank goodness I can't hear you answering. I don't want you to answer this, but I want to tell you the answer. There is only one answer, and the answer is 10. 9.5 is not good enough. 9 is not good enough. You're not going to get a position at Augusta National to work at the Masters if your integrity is not of the highest degree. If you don't answer 10, you don't even get to the next stage of the process of getting to go through the application to become somebody who works at the Augusta National. Communication skills. You know, I went through a hurricane at Ocean Reef about 3 years ago. We were shut down for 100 days. I was called back from a vacation in the Seychelles Islands. It took me 3 days to get back. And when I got back, there was devastation. We incurred $40 million worth of damage to the property. And of course, just like COVID, nobody could work. we had the place shut down for as I said, for 100 days. The one lesson I learned through that, and I learned a lot, but the one that I remember the most is the importance of communicating. And it wasn't just verbal communication, presentation, communication, listening. It was really about all of that wrapped up into one. You know, Jack Welch from GE says, communicate, communicate, communicate. And when you think you've communicated enough, communicate some more. And this is one of the great skills that you really have to master to be able to really do well in our industry. A positive attitude. And here's actually, I'm not telling the story because Greg is here, but it is a story, Greg, that I tell about you all the time, because I've probably sat through more Greg Patterson presentations than most. And I go there because, one, I learn a lot, and two, because they are so entertaining. But you know, if you didn't know Greg, and I've traveled with him around the world, we've been to a number of different places together and presented. But if you didn't know Greg, you would say, well, you know, this is Greg on stage, this is how he does things. But I've actually been to Greg's club. I've actually sat in the back of one of his restaurants. He didn't know myself and Jim Singerling and a few other managers, George Carroll, were going to visit. And we were sitting in the back. We got through the front. We were sitting in the back, told. And honestly, talk about a positive attitude. We watched Greg come into the club, and you could just see by the energy and the dynamic and the positive attitude that he brought into the club as to how everybody responded to it. And that's an important lesson for all of us, because yeah, everybody picks up on how you as the leader are going to come into work and how you are going to present to yourself. So Greg, thank you for that. Commitment. You know, if you say you're going to do something, you need to do it. You need to be committed to the process. The ability to inspire. You know, it's important that each one of the people that work with you feel inspired, feel like they have a just cause, feel like they are doing something for the greater good. You know, number 6 is forward thinking, and then 6+ is strategic thinking. Sorry, you can't really see that. Mine thing's covering it, but strategic thinking, I think of those two as totally different. You know, forward thinking for me is thinking into the future, the 1, 3, 5, 10-year plan. And strategic thinking for me is really, how do I get there? How do I get to where I want to be in year 1? How do I get to be where I want to be in year 3, 5, and 10? Common sense, gut feeling, what's in your gut, what you feel in your gut. You know when something is right, and I really trust my gut. My gut has very seldom let me down. And that's the common sense gut reaction that I think you bring. Oftentimes we get so caught up with, you know, the education and all the courses and stuff that we do that we forget that just using a little bit of common sense. Confidence. You know, confidence is not something for everybody, and sometimes you're more confident than others, and other times you're just not feeling that good, but you need to project the ability, you need to project confidence. People want to trust you, people want to see you as that leader, and people want to see confidence. So in difficult times, you know, going through that hurricane, that 100 days of hell, as I call it and shared with my guys, I mean, we were really, we needed all of the senior leadership to step up and show confidence and let people know things were going to get better. A total devastation, as I mentioned. Decisive. My one on decisive is that by not making a decision, you are actually making a decision. So you need to be decisive. You need to make a decision. If you make the wrong decision, learn from it, admit it, and move on. Financial savvy. You know, that's one that one is asterisks, as is communication skills. These are learned. You know, I was a very bad financial manager when I first got into this industry. I'd never had any finance at school or at university. I'd never learned anything about finance. And, you know, I had to go back. I went back to Cornell. I did a course in finance. I did a 7-day executive course in finance. And it was a great way of learning. But that's something today in the executive search field that people are looking for. When you're looking for future general managers, future COOs, whatever you want to call it, we're looking for people that have financial savvy. And then as we get to the last two, fairness, you know, my friend Jay DiPietro, who used to run a club down here in Florida, you know, he would say, treat other people the way you want to be treated, but there's a new rule, and that is treat other people the way they want to be treated. The way I want to be treated might not be the way Mike wants to be treated or anybody else wants to be treated. You need to think through how you treat people, and as long as you're being fair, Again, a good deal is when both parties walk away feeling like, hey, there was a compromise. And then finally, passion. This is what I believe this industry runs on. We love what we do. We work long hours. We committed to giving of ourselves to our members, to our staff. It is something that I just feel passionate about. And I look back and I think how blessed I've been to be involved in this industry, over the years. So allow your passion to become your purpose, and it will one day become your profession. And I feel like, the last 33 years of my profession in the club management, the passion I've had for it has been amazing. Live what you love. I love quotes. I love these little statements because, I used to stick them up on the refrigerator for my kids, and I used to send them text messages and have this printed out. But, it's whatever it takes to get you to start thinking, about your success. So ladies and gentlemen, now that we have 12 success factors separating good from great leaders, what do we do? It's one thing sitting here telling you all about this, but at the end of the day, what are the things that we need to do? And this is something I've given a lot of thought to. Normally, I take you through each one of these in a different slide, and we could talk to each one of these things in one of these points in a 10, 15, 20 minutes. But here is what I believe. This is, again, just my belief. And if there's anything in here that you take away from this, that's great. But I'm going to put this over here. Share information is a good communicator. Somebody who is a good communicator shares information. It's so easy as a leader to hold all the information in and not share. And one of the big lessons for me I learned at Ocean Reef was I wanted to share as much as possible. During that hurricane I mentioned, we were communicating with our members twice a day. Every morning and every evening, we sent out a communique. And we probably got more letters back from them saying, wow, that was unbelievable. Thank you for communicating with us. What that led to, though, was that it was difficult to wean them off that communication, because when you're communicating during a time of crisis, it's very different than the communication during normal times. I think a lot of my colleagues are going through that right now with COVID. The other thing is appreciation and recognition. And that is, I used to think of myself as the highest paid in Florida backslapper, high fiver, handshaker in the business, because my job was to go out there and to thank our members for being with us and doing what they did as being members. And more importantly, my job was to go out there and thank our associates that worked with us, worked with me, to be able to provide that level of service to our members. So being able to show that, whether it's a handwritten note, whether it's a birthday card, we've heard this all, you've all seen this 100 times, but is it top of mind? Is it something that we do every single day? I got out of a meeting I shared with Mike today. I was in a meeting from 9 till 6 with an architect doing a charrette. And I was driving home, and I'm ashamed to say this, but I was texting while I was driving home because I knew I was coming to prepare for this. But I had to send a text off to this guy and to the other people that were on the call to say thank you for the day and what had happened. And I know the responses were immediate, and people just appreciate you being able to do that. The next one, surround yourself with smart people. You have a lot of smart people around you. We each have weaknesses. If we know what our weaknesses are, I think that's great, because then we're able to surround ourselves with people that have strengths in areas that we have. I've always had a great financial person because, as I mentioned to you earlier, that was one of my weaknesses. And I learned by having really good people surrounding me that were really smart people with that. And then when you surround yourself with smart people, empower them by delegating and holding them accountable and making sure you delegate. You can't manage people, everyone the same way. I'm not sure if you've all heard of a program called a predictive index, which really is it's a recruitment tool, but in my case, it's also a management tool, because with a predictive index, it gets you to understand other people's personalities and styles, and you can then adjust your style to manage the person that you're dealing with. So for example, somebody who comes from a financial background, who's normally sitting in the back office, looking at ledgers, looking at numbers, looking at, sort of in that environment. Mine is more of an outgoing personality, more meet and greet, handshaking, high-fiving. you know, we talk a different language. So when I go in and speak to him, I've got to be able to adjust my style so that my communication with them works well. And likewise, when they come to my office, into my environment, I want them to be able to do this, to do the same thing. Rome wasn't built in a day. Set small milestones. You know, you don't run a marathon tomorrow. You start building up to get that. Life is short. Enjoy what you do. Have fun. I know Greg has had a lot of fun, and I certainly have had a lot of fun in my time. And again, what Greg could do and get away with at the beach club, I couldn't do and get away with at Congressional Country Club. So our versions of having fun at the club would have to change depending on your club and depending on where you are. The next point, 7, friction points. I would tell all of my staff, whether I was working at Congressional or Ocean Reef or at the PGA Tour, my job is to remove friction points. What is it that I can do today to help you remove a friction point that would allow you to do your job better, and by doing your job better, make life better for our members? What is it that I can do? So your job, I see it as a leader, successful leader, is to remove obstacles. Give feedback, make your teams productive. Work ethic, we talked about a little earlier, and I so strongly believe in work ethic. I'm not the smartest, not the most talented, not the most gifted person, but I know with my marathons and my triathlons and my perseverance to play the game of golf, I know I can outwork most people. And I think it goes for everybody here. We all have the same. It's a matter of making a choice. Your gifts are given, but your work ethic is something you can really work on. And then focus your time, the 80-20 rule. I'm going to talk about that as we get to the end of this presentation. And there you see the 2 rules that I shared with you earlier, that Jay DePietro shared with me: the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated, and the platinum, treat others the way they want to be treated. So a successful leader has integrity, is a great communicator, has a positive attitude, is committed, has the ability to inspire others, is forward thinking, is a strategic thinker, has common sense of gut, is confident, is decisive, is financially savvy, and is fair. Oops. So I share the slide with you because, again, another favorite slide of mine: the greatest pleasure in life is doing what people say you cannot do. I've spent my entire life being told what I can't do, why I can't do it, whether it was my parents, with my father, my mother, brothers, colleagues. Oh, Mike, that's a great idea. I don't know that you could ever do it. Oh, move to America. I don't know if you could do that. That'd be a big deal. Go back to grad school. Oh, I don't know if you could do that. Your grades weren't that good. Become a golf professional. Well, I'm not sure you could do that. So again, my greatest pleasure in life has been proving other people wrong. So as we start winding up this presentation, and again, I apologize for the lapse there, but I do want to get to some questions if there are any. We've posed a lot of questions tonight. I've asked a lot of questions of you. Hopefully these are questions you can reflect on and questions that you can look at and you can kind of figure out whether any of this works for you. So a lot of different questions. But again, the key is nothing matters about this presentation. Absolutely nothing matters about this presentation other than we got to see each other and we got to spend some time together. Nothing matters unless you take action. So later on this afternoon, tonight, tomorrow morning, you're going to get a worksheet from Mike. What action are you going to take? What are the things you're going to set down? Some of you probably already have action plans. Some of you already have a list of goals that you want to achieve. Well, when last did you look at it? This is probably a good reminder to have a look at that. Action changes things. If you purposely are thinking about an act, doing something, you are going to see change. You are going to see positive change in your life if you do that. And then what will you sacrifice? How do you expect to experience growth in your life if you don't sacrifice? And I will tell you right now, you will not experience growth if you don't sacrifice. You have to give off time. You have to make these different commitments. And when you do this, obviously, you are going to grow as an individual. And we know this from science. You have to get outside of your comfort zone. We know you've got to do something for about 21 days to make it a habit, to really be able to make that part of your lifestyle moving forward. So those studies are all out there. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but again, this is Tiger Woods and when he grew up. I was never the most talented. I was never the biggest. I was never the fastest. I certainly was never the strongest. The only thing I had was my work ethic, and that's what has got me this far. And I believe that. I mean, I really do. He's really talented. So then finally, the question is, if not now, when? So again, this was put in, this presentation was done for people who were sitting basically during COVID, thinking about what their lives are going to be like. You know, one of my sons lost his job, still doesn't have a job. There's literally millions of people out of jobs. So in the US, so what are they doing now to change their future? And when things get back to some sort of normalcy, what will they have done to make themselves better, to make themselves more desirable? I mentioned to you the 80-20 rule, and I mention that only because I'm fascinated by this. I've done a lot of reading on this. There's a lot of books being written about this. This guy, Richard Coe, is one of the guys that I think has done an awful lot of research on this. And again, if you're interested in something like that, I would just suggest you have a look at this, read up on this, study up on this. Again, you're spending 20% of your time is going to give you 80% of the rewards. Are you spending your time in the right place? Are you focused your time in the right place? Now, apologize for this, this little thing's sort of all over the place, but you know, one of the things that, you know, I'm such a firm believer of reading and how important reading is. And a really good friend of Greg Patterson's and myself, Dick Copeland, you know, is a huge reader. You know, leaders are readers and readers are leaders. But here was something that was cut out of a PGA magazine, probably 15 years ago. And I had it in a deck of slides that I shared with a lot of people. And when I was doing golf operations and other presentations, I would always put the slide in. And I put it back in again because even though it's 15 plus years old, all of these books that are there today are still great books today for you to read. And there's probably, you know, millions more that are out there by the same authors who've written more books. But there's a lot out there that one should look at and certainly read. It's nearly past my bedtime, so I won't be doing too much reading tonight before I go to bed. And then as we kind of wrap up here, what is your personal call to action? You know, begin your educational journey. Your educational journey is not a university educational journey. It's your educational journey to become successful. You know, complete a specialization. You know, is it wine? You know, is it fly fishing? I don't know what it is, whatever it is that you think. When we look and are trying to find good fits for clubs as in the search business, we're really looking for somebody who has a very diverse background. You know, we look for people who are interesting, people who do things, who have achieved things, climb mountains, run marathons, you know, are wine connoisseurs who travel around the world, been to 100 different countries. Those are the things that we look for that make them different. And then what is your personal definition of success? Have you written that down? You need to. What are your arrows? What is in your quiver? What do you have right now? And what are the arrows you wish you would have sometime in the future? And then how do you go about that? List the actions you need to take now to achieve that success. And then finally, what will you need to sacrifice to achieve that? Because it's one thing, as I said, to say, this is what the action I'm going to take. But the action, it's useless if you don't realize that it's going to come with some kind of sacrifice. I mentioned to you about the worksheet, and Mike will send that around to all of you. Oh, sorry. So my son works for Nike. I'm a huge Nike fan. I played Nike equipment for a long, long time. I still a big believer in the Nike product, and I know that there's a lot wrong with this company, and don't want to get into the debate about that, but this was one of the original slogans that they had, one of the original taglines when they first started, when Phil Knight first started. And my point about the slide is not about the power of Nike or the sweatshops or anything else that might be out there. The power here is of the words. You have to just do it. You have to just get out there and do it. You have to take action and you have to sacrifice. So ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of my presentation. And Michael, I will hand it over to you and see if there are any questions that anybody would have. Again, we try to condense this. This would normally be an hour and a half presentation, but because of Zoom and all the other stuff, we wanted to condense this into around 50 minutes to an hour with some questions. So Mike, over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Michael. It's always great to hear it. There's always the sharpening the saw is such an important thing from the 7 habits of highly effective people. And you mentioned at the beginning, just learning every day, learning something new. It's just that continual improvement on a day-to-day basis. And that's either you personally or for your team, and get them into that mindset. We'll just have a quick little one between you and I on a couple of takeaways that I've got for it before I open it up to the participants. We'll go live so you can ask the questions in a live format, and then we'll shut it down after that. But yeah, with all that, I mean, the word I probably didn't hear as much in there. Like, this is about the motivation. So that what's that point for you, or for what you can do for the ones viewing this? In where do you find that inner motivation to get up every morning to go for a run, or to get up to do whatever we do? I know passion plays a big part of that, but I guess that's the starting point. Is that correct? That why behind what we want to do, and then actually sticking to it and getting the disciplines for it?
So Mike, it's interesting, you know, one of the courses I did when I went back to grad school was a course in sports psychology. And for years as a coach, as a high school, you know, rugby coach and cricket coach, I always thought that it was my job to motivate my team. And it wasn't until I went to grad school and did this course in sports psychology that I realized I can't motivate anybody. Motivation is internal. Motivating is intrinsic. It's something that I can help facilitate motivation. I can help you get to a point, whether it's a presentation like this or asking you some probing questions. But at the end of the day, it has to be something within you that wants to do it. So, you know, at different stages, if you accept the fact that you have to take action, and if you accept the fact that you have to sacrifice. Now, those are the 2 key questions in my mind. When I forget about motivation, those are the two key questions. When you are committed to those 2 things, the rest all falls into place. And if you understand those 2 things, that you're not going to get better at anything you do if you don't take action. And to take action, you have to understand that comes with sacrifice. You know, I get up every single morning that I'm at home. And last year I traveled, you know, similar to Greg and some of the others. Last year I traveled 180,000 miles in the air, 180,000 miles. And for this year, I've traveled literally nothing. I've been at home, you know, for the last, you know, 4.5 months. And my goal is to walk every single day. And every day I was at home, I would be walking. And my excuse was, well, I was flying, I'm not at home, so I'm not going to walk. But I think when you make that action and you realize that sacrifice means that I'm going to miss some time in the morning with my wife. Dale and I are not going to be able to spend as much time as we like together, maybe over a cup of coffee. Because when I come in from the walk, I'm running in to take a shower, I'm scoffing down some breakfast, you know, with her, not quality time, but then I'm in the office, right? So I think the motivation is, first of all, it's inside of you, and you have to have those 2 elements. That to me is the key. And that certainly comes from the research I did in sports psychology. I just believe that.
Right.
You can apply that to golf. You know, what is the action? The action is going out and hitting balls. Well, you can't go out and hit balls for three minutes and think that you've done well. You've got to go out there, and the ones that do well, whether it's Ben Hogan, Tiger Woods, Jim Furyk, whoever you want to name, they're out there pounding balls. Ben Hogan, digging it out of the dirt. They're out there doing it for hours and hours at a time. I see that Ernie Els lives down the road from us, and we see each other fairly regularly. And I thought to myself, you know, even at age 50, the amount of time he spends on the golf course, away from his wife, away from his kids, away from his family. Now, it's given them a great living, but think about what he's had to sacrifice to get there, right? So anyway, that's kind of where I like it.
No, fantastic. Thanks, Michael. I've got a question from Aaron Muirhead. You would know. Go
Hi,
ahead,
Aaron. Yeah, it's I follow him and his wife on Facebook, and Aaron's a really good man. I appreciate his question. Well, maybe I'll hold off on how good he is until after I hear his question.
You'd see my wife a lot more than you see me, Mike.
I do, Aaron, I do. And she's a beautiful woman. Tell her I say hi.
Geez, I will do. Mike, I guess my question was, and you partly mentioned it just in your last piece, is what are the daily habits that you adopt or have adopted through your career that you think have contributed to your success, both personal and professional?
Aaron, that's a really good question, and honestly, I wish I had a good answer for you. I can only I can only reflect back and think about that from my own personal experience, and one would be, and it's funny that Greg should be on this call, but I remember Greg telling the story about riding his bicycle to work every day, and I couldn't really, I just struggled with that. LA, riding a bicycle, 12 miles or 14 miles, you'll probably correct me, maybe it was longer, I don't remember, but it's committing yourself to daily exercise, I believe, is absolutely important. Whether it's walking, running, riding a bike, doing something, playing paddle tennis, some form of exercise is critically important, I think. I believe spending time on your own, meaning spending time with yourself, is critically important. It just so happens that my exercise time and my time for spending time with myself happens to be the same. I walk the same 5.5-mile route every day. And, I listen to music sometimes. I listen to a tape. I listen to a book or, some kind of stuff, something I might be reading. But that's my own time. That's the time where I'm the most creative. That's the time where I'm thinking about things. I got my little piece of paper. I've got my little pencil, my golf pencil. I'm writing down things, or I'm dictating it onto my phone. And then when I come back, I kind of download on that. And then the other thing I wish, knowing your age and knowing your family situation, I think one of the things I wish I would have done more is understand the sacrifices that we talked about earlier. And part of my sacrifice was really missing a lot of my kids' sports and a lot of my kids' activities. And I regret that today. And when I look back on it, it's probably one of the only regrets I have, is that I didn't spend more time with them. I kind of got into their sports as they started getting really good. So once they were playing, on the first team, or they were playing in university, it's kind of when I was at a stage in my career where I felt like I could leave the club and do some of these things. And as we all know, if you're not at the club, somebody's going to step up. You're a good leader. You put things in place. And when you leave to go to another job, when I left Congressional to go to Ocean Reef, they didn't bat an eyelid. Within, my 3 months notice period, we'd found a new general manager. He went in there, he did a great job and is still doing a great job. So nobody's indispensable. Nobody, cannot be replaced. So your family is so critically important. And as I said, I think that's important, is finding time, making time with them. Again, I think probably the biggest regret. And then the last thing I would just say to you, which is a little counterproductive to what I just said, and that is work ethic, right? So again, I think you got to work smart. I used to work hard and I used to work long hours, and I've realized today, I think that's still very important. But I've learned to temper that with trying to work smart and all the things we talked about today, finding good people to surround me with. I remember, I think it was my second year at Congressional, my president, super nice guy, lawyer, and I had gone down to the PGA Tour offices for a meeting, and I was gone for 2 days. And when I got back, this guy was a real jokester. He in a very serious voice, he said, Mike, he said, the club ran better when you were away than it runs when you're here. And I immediately was offended by that. And he could see it. He knew exactly what buttons to push, because I immediately kind of was caught off guard. I was like, really? And he started laughing. And he said, but Mike, it's really true. He said, think about this. You put some really good people in place. They don't want to see you fail. They want you to be successful. And as a result, when you're not there, they actually work harder. They put in longer hours because they want you and the club to be successful. So hope that helps, Aaron.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks, Mike. Great to hear from you again too.
Yeah, thanks, bro.
Thanks, Mike. I've got Greg Patterson on the line. You ready for him again?
I'm not ready for Greg. This could go anywhere.
We'll just unmute him. He'll come on in a second here. He had his hand up.
Unmuted? There we go.
you go.
Mike, first of all, absolutely fantastic presentation. There's so much to chew on, and obviously taking those principles and translating them into practice, making things happen is the key right now. But the question that I have, we're all going through the virus right now, the lockdown and the difficulties that clubs are encountering. What's the biggest leadership shortcoming that you've witnessed, because you know sort of everybody in the business and you know the business? What leadership shortcomings have surfaced during the virus madness that we should be addressing as professionals?
Greg, again, obviously a great question, and one that I'm going to have to think a little bit about. I think, sitting on that alliance group call of 16 club managers and then kind of traveling around and talking to different club guys, I think the biggest leadership shortcoming I'm seeing has been that general managers are deferring the COVID experience to either the president or to their boards or to a committee. And like you, I like committees and I like boards and I work well with them. But this is a time where nobody really knows what's going on. We listen to Fauci, we listen to all the other pundits here that we have in the United States talking about this, but nobody really understands what's going on. And I think listening to your president or listening to your committee president, I hear more, and I've had this conversation with a couple of different board members. They've said to me that I wish our general manager would take more of a leadership role in addressing this. And by that, I think, Greg, they mean, what is happening with all of the safety protocols? What is happening with how we're opening up? What is happening about how we're going to be serving food and beverage? One club, basically down here in Florida, was not prepared to do takeout because, I'm not going to do takeout or takeaway, as they might say in Australia and New Zealand, as we say in South Africa, takeaway or takeout. We're not going to do that because it's going to set the expectation for that to happen forever moving forward. Well, who gives a damn? What we got to do is right now, members are needing something. They need food. They need to be able to easily access. And that's what clubs are all about. I mean, Michael McCarthy, a couple of the other guys here, Brett Morris at Admiral's Cove, a couple of these guys have we had a big to-go business at Ocean Reef, but they've never really had that. But a lot of them have embraced that and taken that leadership role, created that opportunity. And I think those boards and those members are happy with that. I think when leaders, general managers, whatever you want to call them, and there's a lot of fancy titles out there, but general managers not taking the leadership role in a time of crisis is, I think, the biggest sin that is out there. I think now more so than ever is a time for them to step up and take that leadership. I'm not saying become the benevolent dictator. I'm not saying that at all. But I am seeing and hearing that general managers are deferring more to boards and directors than they would be to their own research and to their own investigation and to do what's best for the club. That would be my answer.
Fabulous. Outstanding, Michael.
All right. Thanks, Greg. We'll take a few more questions here. Warwick, did you have a question? I see your microphone unmuted.
No, I just wanted to thank Michael and yourself. I've got to jump into a history and archives meeting, which is something we do tremendously well here. So I just really wanted to express my thanks and I really appreciated the time from you both. And good initiative, Mike. Can't wait to see you again.
Thanks, Warwick.
Appreciate it. Great to hear from you, buddy.
Excellent. Michelle, one of our Kiwi friends who just, how are you going?
Michelle.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm fine. Do you have my mud house?
It's, delays, COVID delays. It's still on its way.
COVID delays.
No, we're doing good down here, thank you. We came
awesome.
out of our lockdown. I reopened the club on May 14, and going guns blazing. Everyone's back, members are back. And we're getting lots and lots of domestic green fee bookings coming through because we're still obviously not allowed to travel overseas. So things are looking bright down in the Hawke's Bay here.
Well, congratulations to you and your Prime Minister and to your country for doing such a great job. I think what has been achieved down there is certainly something that a lot of other countries should be looking to and emulating. So congrats to you guys.
Yeah, thank you. It's been, I think we got to 24 days completely COVID free. But obviously there's Kiwis overseas that are coming home, and I think there's about 10 in the whole country, and they're still in managed isolation. So yeah, trying to keep on top of it. Well, not me,
Yeah.
but our team of 5 million.
Well,
Michael,
job.
that an interesting point with the takeaway. I mean, we've seen down here where it's they say don't waste a good crisis. We hear bantered around a lot of places, but the opportunity to implement some changes that you haven't thought about doing, or you may have had backlash from your members, where now you have an opportunity where you're changing the new norm. I know a lot here are going to online scorecards, which a lot of the older members or non-tech members may have not wanted to do, but now they're seeing that, wow, it's not that hard, and it will be very tough to go back to what it was before. So we've got these opportunities now that takeaway is a whole nother business model with our hotels, our restaurants and cafes being closed, but they were still allowed to do the takeaway, and we're seeing some big business in that one. So a lot of people have taken that opportunity to grow their business. I think that ties really well into what you've been talking about today.
Michael, one of the other interesting ones that we've seen here in the US, especially down here in Florida and in parts of California, I know this was at Riviera as well, is that our members were scared to go into grocery stores, and as a result, because we have so much stuff delivered to clubs, right, whether it's food or produce or whatever it was, and our restaurants were closed, and they were cleaning supplies and all of the wipes and all of the other disinfectants, you couldn't get it. You couldn't get toilet paper. I mean, and yet the bigger organizations could get that. So a lot of clubs started putting together parcels and baskets of what people could come and get. Things that you couldn't get, toilet paper, sanitary wipes and all of that. So again, you've got to look at the opportunities that exist. And you don't really have to look that far, because your members are telling you. I mean, I knew that it was difficult for Dale and I to go to the grocery store, right? So it would be an absolute no-brainer to think, well, if it's inconvenient for me and I'm nervous going there, how easy would it be to put something together? Because, we're ordering, you can imagine, a big club is ordering, hundreds and thousands of toilet rolls. So to be able to sell that when literally, Michael, you could not get toilet roll. Yep. I mean, it's crazy, right? Your toilet paper. So anyway,
we've had the opposite. A lot of people try to maximize the opportunity with that, and now we're stuck with a lot of sanitizers and a lot of extra stock. Because we're fortunate, we've come through a lot quicker, same as New Zealand. We're seeing the other side of it at the moment. But I was interested in if there's no other questions that are coming through, we'll wrap up in just a second and then just do a off recording chat with you for the ones that want to stick around. But your tagline, perfection is just a starting point. I've seen that come through on your emails a few times, and I'm big on vision, big on, is that focal point for us in any operation and for any club. If you want to talk about how, I guess, what that means to you, and how do you go beyond perfection, or is that striving day by day, or?
Well, I think if you shoot for that, it's kind of the old thing. If you shoot for the stars and you miss, you're still up there in the stratosphere, right? So I think people just set their sights too low. Yeah. And I think if you put it out there, for my little company, I want people to know that that's what I'm striving for. When you engage me and you work with me, that's my expectation, not only of myself, but of what I'm going to be delivering to you. So whether I'm working with a PGA, whether I'm working with Riviera, working with Ryland, that's what and that's part of what, now you have to be able to back that up, right? So part of that is all of the things we talked about today, but I think that's just it's a starting point. It's one that perfection is never achieved. The goalposts are always moved. Today you do something that is as close to perfect as you're going to get, and tomorrow the posts move, right? So you're only as good as the last hamburger you cooked, you're only as good as the last golf shot you hit. But if you're aiming for that, and that's the sight that you set yourself all the time, I believe you get really close to that, and I think that's what matters. And And for some people, I think this is a whole nother topic, Mike. This is another hour discussion on this, but it is one that is something you really do have to strive for. You miss 99.9999% of the time, but every now and again you hit something and you say, hey, that's as close to as good as I could have done it. So I like to put it out there. It's sort of like, you know, if you're going to do, and I could keep going back to running a marathon, but if you're going to run a marathon, the best thing to do is tell people you're going to do it, because that holds you accountable.
Yeah.
And that's really what that thing for me does. It holds me accountable. Every time I send out an email, that's at the bottom of my email, because that's what I want to remind myself of, but I also want to remind them that's what you should expect every time, you know, we interact. So
yeah, no, it was one of those things that stood out. I know, you know, Greg has it on his own on his emails as well. Well, I guess one final one is, you know, I was jotting some notes down. Well, two things. One is every time I've caught up with you at any of the conferences, usually in Asia or down here, you, Greg, you know, a lot of the leaders that we look up to, you know, from your wisdom, is that you're always writing stuff down. You always have your little notepad, you're always pulling something out, and you seem to always take away something. Either it's something new, or in many cases, it just might be a refresh for you. Yeah, I know. and Greg says it's 500-page white paper on it. It's amazing. It's
I learned this from Greg. I mean, honestly, I remember as a new guy to CMAA going to a conference, and it was obviously a long time ago, but I remember sitting down and, you know, I heard it from Greg, I heard it from Dick Copeland. I started hearing it from so many people. I mean, I always thought I was good at note taking, but, you know, it's, you have to write it down. You know, as I forget, Dick's comment is the faded ink, the most faded ink is better than the best memory, or something along those lines. And the point is, you got to write it down. You got to remember, you know, how are you going to remember if you don't write it down? And if it's written down, I mean, I don't know how many notepads Greg's been through in his lifetime, but it's a lot.
Yeah, well, great. Well, just in closing, I appreciate your time, Michael. I know it's getting late and you've had a massive day. The one item on the list that maybe add is your network and your friendship is one of the values. You've met so many people and you've influenced so many people over the years. That's a great attribute. You know, everybody thinks of you so highly. So, you know, thanks again for your time. You know, to talk to us down under, halfway around the world. We appreciate it. Yeah, well, I'll wrap it up for the official proceedings, and I'll turn the recording off so you can ask any really curly questions if you like. But thanks very much, Michael. I'm sure we'll hopefully get you down here over the next year or two once when things change.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it, and I really do appreciate you all jumping on the call. And I did see a list of everybody and a lot of good friends on there, and I really appreciate you doing that. And again, Facebook is a great way to stay in touch. And my email, when you get this little worksheet, my email address and cell numbers on there. And if any of you on WhatsApp, on Facebook, or you want to send me an email, please feel free to do so. Yeah, well, that's what's really changed, isn't it? With the, you know, you don't necessarily have to be at work all the time. You can do so much of our work now from home or for traveling, you know, with technology when it's working 100% perfectly. But, you know, I appreciate that. I will wrap that up. The official proceedings. We'll send out a recording of of this for if you want to share with any of your team. The PowerPoint slide as well as the worksheet. So we'll have that out in the next few days. But thanks very much for attending. I'll wrap this up now for GICTV episode number 5 with Michael Leemhuis. And yeah, leave it open if you want to have a chat with Mike for a few minutes. Just let us know.
Michael, thanks again. It was